It started quiet, the kind of quiet you don't notice until it settles in your bones and doesn't leave. It was a Thursday, the kind of sticky, heavy summer evening that Savannah's famous for. The kind where even the wind doesn't bother trying. I'd finished up early at work and thought I'd surprise Ella with dinner. Nothing fancy, just that seafood spot near Forsyth she loved. We hadn't been out in a while. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was already there. That was odd. Ella never got home before me, not on a Thursday. And never without texting. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe she'd gotten lucky with traffic. Maybe she needed to decompress. But something itched at the back of my neck. I stepped inside and that's when everything shifted. The first thing I noticed was the shoes. They were sitting neatly by the door, not mine. Not even close. Sleek, dark brown leather with a designer logo I didn't recognize. New. Untouched soles. Expensive in a way that said, look at me, without trying too hard. I stared at them longer than I should have, waiting for my brain to offer an explanation that made sense. It didn't. Next came the smell, cologne, sharp and earthy with that citrus top note that screams money. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even something I'd smelled on anyone I knew. And it wasn't faint. It filled the house like someone had sprayed it on every doorknob. I called out, trying to steady my voice. Ella? She emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel. Her hair was damp, curling at the ends in a way that meant she hadn't blow-dried it. That was rare. She always dried her hair. She hated how frizzy it got in the humidity. Oh hey, babe, she said, smiling, a little breathless like she'd been rushing. Didn't expect you this early. Yeah, I wrapped up quick. Figured we could grab dinner. She walked over and gave me a quick kiss, her skin still warm from the shower. That sounds nice, she said, then glanced past me toward the door, toward the shoes. Oh, you saw those? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Company? She laughed too quickly. Rachel stopped by with her boyfriend. They didn't stay long. Just dropped in, had some wine, caught up. I was about to hop in the shower when they left. She said it like it was nothing. Like she wasn't wrapped in a towel with freshly shaved legs and the smell of another man still hanging in the air. I walked toward the laundry room, I don't even know why. Call it instinct. That's when I saw it. 2 wine glasses sitting in the laundry basket. One still had lipstick smudged on the rim. The other was larger, the kind Ella never used. And there, tangled in a pile of towels, was a men's dress shirt. White. Slim fit. Still smelled like that same cologne. I called over my shoulder, you said Rachel brought her boyfriend? Yeah, she said casually, voice echoing from the bedroom. He spilled something on his shirt, I told him I'd throw it in the wash real quick. They were in a rush. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at the shirt like it might explain itself. It didn't. That night, Ella was different. Attentive. Clingy almost. She changed into my favorite sundress, the yellow one with the tie straps. She made shrimp and grits from scratch, even pulled out that garlic bread she usually only saved for holidays. She laughed at all my dumb jokes, touched my arm too often, looked into my eyes like we were on a first date. And maybe that's what it was for her, a reset. Or a distraction. Maybe she thought if she played the part well enough, I'd forget what I saw. What I smelled. What I felt gnawing at the corners of my gut. But I didn't forget. Later that night, she curled up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder, humming along to the movie we weren't really watching. I looked down at her, trying to study her face. The little details that used to feel so familiar suddenly felt strange. Her smile was softer, more cautious. Her eyes flicked to mine too often, as if checking to see what I was thinking. She kissed me goodnight like everything was normal, like the world hadn't shifted an inch. But I felt it. Something invisible had cracked between us. I didn't say anything. I kissed her back and waited for sleep. But I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept looping through everything, the shoes, the shirt, the glasses. That smell. And the worst part? The fact that she'd lied so easily. Not just the content of the lie, but the calm in her voice. The way she played it like a script she'd rehearsed. And I started wondering, was this the first time? Or just the first time I noticed? The next morning, she was up early. Made pancakes. I hadn't seen her make pancakes in months. She poured me coffee without me asking, kissed my cheek on the way out the door, and told me she loved me. I stood in the doorway long after she left, staring at the spot where those shoes had been. They were gone now. But the scent? Still there. Like it was mocking me. They say hindsight is 20/20ths. I never liked that phrase until it started haunting me. In the days that followed that strange Thursday, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Not in a dramatic, world-ending kind of way, more like a painting I'd been staring at for years only to realize the frame was slightly crooked. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending everything fits. And so I started thinking. Not just thinking, dissecting. Every moment, every glance, every late arrival over the past few months. I played it all back, piece by piece, like I was reviewing footage from a crime scene I didn't know I'd lived through. It wasn't just the shoes or the cologne anymore. It was everything. Ella had changed, and I mean really changed. I used to chalk it up to growth. She'd gotten into yoga, started wearing different clothes, trying new makeup styles. Nothing dramatic, just elevated. Tighter jeans. More heels. Lipstick shades that didn't exist in our bathroom cabinet a year ago. At first, I told myself it was self-expression. That she was just taking better care of herself. I even admired it. Told her she looked beautiful, and she did. But now every outfit felt like a costume. Not for me. For someone else. Then there were the nights out. Girls' nights. Book clubs. Coworker get-togethers that turned into late-night Uber rides and vague stories about wine bars I'd never heard of. Sometimes she'd come home wired, tossing her shoes in the hallway and crawling into bed with a giddy smile that didn't match the exhaustion she claimed. Other nights she came home quiet. Too quiet. Like her body was home but her mind hadn't made the trip. I remember one night a few weeks back I'd reached for her phone on the nightstand to check the time. Completely harmless. Just a reflex. But she jolted awake like I was holding a grenade. "Don't go through my stuff," she'd said, voice sharp, then softened. "Sorry. I don't like people messing with my phone." At the time, I'd apologized. Told her I wasn't snooping. That I just wanted to see the time. But now? Now I could hear the tremble in her voice I'd missed. I could see the way her eyes flicked to the screen, checking what might have been visible. She never used to lock her phone. Now it was Face ID only, and she never let it out of her sight. Shower? Phone was in the bathroom. Cooking? Propped up against the backsplash. I half expected her to start sleeping with it under her pillow. Our conversations shifted too. They got lighter, but not in a good way. Surface level. Detached. Like we were two actors running lines. The *Macy that used to feel effortless between us had been replaced by politeness, the kind of "how was your day?" that doesn't want a real answer. And the plans, God, the plans. She started resisting anything joint. Trips, dinner with my family, weekend getaways we used to live for. She kept saying she needed space or me time. At first, I respected it. We all need to breathe, right? But then it became the default. Always one step removed. Always on her terms. One night, I suggested we take a short trip, just the two of us. A cabin up in North Georgia. Quiet, scenic, the kind of place that used to light her up. "I don't know," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I've been so busy with work. And I think it might be better if we just took some time to focus on ourselves, you know?" I didn't know. I said I did, but I didn't. There was a moment, just a second, where I saw it in her eyes. The hesitation. The guilt. It passed quickly, replaced by that practiced smile. She was slipping. And I was watching her go without understanding why. The bedroom used to be where we connected, our little bubble where everything else fell away. But lately, even that had changed. She was distant. Present in body, not in spirit. Her touch became brief. Obligatory. She used to trace her fingers along my back when we'd fall asleep. I hadn't felt that in months. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who counted how often his wife touched him. But I was becoming him. Not because I was needy, but because I was afraid. Afraid that someone else had taken my place in her orbit. One morning, while she was in the shower, I stared at the pile of laundry by the hamper. Her clothes. Her scent. And mixed in something else, that same cologne from before. Faint, but there. Like a ghost that refused to leave. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. Because once you open that door, there's no closing it. You either get the truth or a deeper lie. And I didn't know which one scared me more. Instead, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I noticed how she always smiled at her texts but never shared them. How she'd laugh under her breath and quickly change screens when I walked by. How the name Nathan started popping up in casual conversation, her boss. Or was it her boss? Nathan thinks I should go for the promotion. Nathan gave me this wine. He's a total snob about Bordeaux. Nathan says I'm too humble. He's always teasing me about it. It sounded innocent at first. But now it felt like a drumbeat in the background of our lives, soft but steady. I started wondering if Nathan had a pair of fancy leather shoes and a white shirt that smelled like money. I even checked the coat closet one night while she was asleep. The shoes weren't there. Neither was the shirt. Not that I expected them to be. But I had to know. There's something horrifying about living in a house that no longer feels like yours. About kissing someone goodnight while wondering whose name is really on their mind. About sitting across from the person you love and feeling like a stranger. I kept all this to myself. Told no one. Not friends. Not family. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their advice. I wanted the truth and I wanted it clean. So I waited. I watched. I gave her space. And every day, I collected more pieces of a puzzle I never asked to solve. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I already knew. It happened on a Saturday. I'd been carrying that weight, that crawling, relentless suspicion, for weeks by then. I was tired of pretending, tired of second-guessing every word, every glance, every silence that lasted half a second too long. So I made a decision, a quiet, calculated one. I was going to surprise her at work. Not with flowers or lunch or some romantic gesture. No, this wasn't about love anymore. This was about clarity. Proof. I needed to look whatever this was in the face. No more blurry outlines or gut feelings. I needed the truth, hard and cold and undeniable. Ella worked in a modern glass building downtown, all steel beams and windows that caught the sun just right. She'd taken a promotion a few months ago, around the same time she started working weekends, supposedly catching up. Always the dutiful employee, always staying late for the team. I pulled into the parking garage around noon, grabbed 2 coffees from the cafe on the corner, 1 black, 1 caramel latte, her usual, and rode the elevator up to the 15th floor. I figured I'd find her at her desk, maybe buried in spreadsheets, maybe annoyed but pleasantly surprised. What I didn't expect was the look on the receptionist's face the moment I stepped into the lobby. "Blake," she said, blinking like she'd seen a ghost. Hi. Hey, I was just in the area," I said casually. "Thought I'd drop off some coffee. Is Ella around?" She hesitated. Not for long, just long enough. "She's in a meeting. Conference room at the end of the hall." "Thanks," I said, and I started walking before she could say anything else. The hallway was quiet, carpet soft under my feet. The kind of silence that makes every step feel loud. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a presentation. Maybe her sitting around a table with a dozen others, eyes glazed over, sipping lukewarm coffee while someone clicked through a slideshow. What I saw was not that. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling glass. No blinds. No privacy. Just a clear, perfect view. And there she was. Ella. My wife. Sitting in her boss's lap. His name was Nathan. I knew that. I'd seen the name in her emails, heard the stories, the jokes, the compliments, the late-night calls. But I'd never seen his face until that moment. Square jaw. Designer suit. That same cologne. It hit me like a slap, even through the sealed glass. She had her arms around his neck. Her head tilted just slightly, like she was listening to something he whispered. And then, as if in slow motion, she kissed him. Soft. Int asterisk mate. Familiar. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just stood there, watching the woman I'd built my life with dissolve into someone I didn't recognize. Right there, in plain view, like I was the one trespassing. They didn't see me. Or maybe they didn't care. I backed away slowly, heart thudding in my chest, still clutching the 2 coffees like some kind of joke. Like I was the punchline. As I turned the corner to leave, I heard laughter. 2 coworkers stood near the vending machine, chatting. One of them, a guy I vaguely remembered from Ella's company holiday party, smirked. "Did you see him?" he said. "Poor guy. Still thinks they're just working late." His friend chuckled. "Unreal. He's got no clue." I walked past them without a word, jaw clenched, eyes straight ahead. But in that moment, something inside me clicked. They were wrong. I did have a clue. And now I had confirmation. By the time I hit the street, the coffees were in a trash can and my hands were shaking. Not from rage, from focus. My mind was already shifting, pivoting. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry in a parking lot like some heartbroken teenager. No. I was going to plan. I was going to respond. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not by yelling, not by begging, not by asking why. I already knew why. Because she wanted something different. Something exciting. Something outside the boundaries we'd built together. I walked through downtown like I was sleepwalking, barely registering the sounds of the city, horns, voices, a street musician playing a bluesy tune near the square. All I could see was that image, burned into my memory like a scar, Ella smiling in another man's arms. Like I'd never existed. That night, she came home around 7. Same routine. Dropped her bag by the door. Kissed me on the cheek. Told me traffic was a nightmare. I nodded. Said nothing. She sat across from me at dinner and told me about her day, how stressful the meeting had been, how Nathan kept pushing new deadlines. Her hands moved animatedly, her eyes sparkled with energy. Lies. So many lies wrapped in casual tones and practiced smiles. And I watched it all in silence. Because now I had the full picture. No more wondering. No more doubts. She wasn't just drifting. She wasn't just lost. She'd made a choice. A deliberate one. And now? It was my turn. After dinner, she said she had work to catch up on. Took her laptop into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. I sat in the living room, staring at the TV while the screen flickered through Netflix menus I wasn't watching. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was awake. There's a clarity that comes with betrayal. A sharpness. Everything becomes simple. You stop asking questions. You stop chasing explanations. You start making moves. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't say a word. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not when she kissed me goodbye or sent her usual midday text, "Hope your day's going okay, 2 hearts. I didn't respond. I didn't confront her. That would have been too easy. Too dramatic. No, I needed something better. Smarter. Colder. I went quiet, strategically quiet. The kind of silence that makes noise without ever raising its voice. While Ella carried on like nothing had changed, I started moving behind the curtain. A slow, methodical unraveling. Step 1. I opened a new bank account. It was the first thing I did after work the next day. I walked into the branch where we had our joint account, smiled at the teller, and opened a personal account under just my name. I transferred just under the limit that would flag anything suspicious, enough to start stacking for what was coming. Step 2. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I found someone sharp, the kind of guy who came recommended by a friend who'd gone through his own messy split. Discreet. Strategic. Ruthless if need be. We set a meeting for the end of the week. Step 3. I started watching her. Really watching her. Ella had always been good at lying, too good. But now that I knew what to look for, I saw everything. The subtle tension in her shoulders when I asked about her weekend plans. The way her eyes flicked down to her phone every time it buzzed. The giddy little smile she tried to suppress when reading texts. She thought I didn't notice. And that was exactly what I wanted her to think. Meanwhile, I began separating the threads of our life, untangling myself from our shared accounts, utilities, subscriptions. Everything we built together, I began dismantling in silence. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she assumed it was forgetfulness. I let her believe that. Let her stay comfortable. Because comfortable people don't prepare for storms. One week in, I removed her access to the emergency savings. I called the mortgage company and ensured only my name was on the contact list. I redirected my paycheck to the new account. I left the joint one with just enough to keep her from getting suspicious, just enough to keep the illusion alive. She started talking about a weekend spa trip with the girls. I told her it sounded like a great idea. She smiled, relieved. Kissed me on the cheek. Said I'd been so supportive lately. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I told her to take my card. She did. The next day, it was declined. That's when the cracks started showing. "Babe, something weird happened today," she said casually over dinner. "The card didn't go through at the spa. Do you think the bank flagged it?" I didn't even flinch. "Maybe. I'll check it." She smiled, trusting. Still believing the story she was telling herself, that everything was fine, that I was still in the dark. But the panic was there now, just beneath the surface. Subtle. Controlled. Her eyes lingered on me a little longer. Her phone stayed closer than ever. That night, I watched her delete an entire message thread before bed. She didn't know I saw. 2 weeks in, I had enough evidence to move forward. My lawyer had pulled credit card records, transaction histories, phone logs. It painted a clear picture, one that would hold up in court. The man she thought was a secret? He was now a documented part of our story. And so I filed. Quietly. Efficiently. Legal separation. Financial misconduct. Grounds, adultery. The papers were drafted. The process had big asterisk N. But still, I said nothing. Because there was one final thing I needed, timing. I waited until her coworkers began noticing something was off. Nathan, the man she had thrown our marriage away for, started getting heat from HR. Apparently, someone anonymously forwarded *TS of messages and meeting room reservations. Nothing illegal, but enough to raise eyebrows. Office gossip travels fast. What was once whispered admiration turned into curious stares and subtle side eyes. She came home quieter. "I think people at work are acting weird," she said one night. "I don't know why." I shrugged. "Maybe they're just jealous of your promotion." She smiled weakly. She didn't know I'd submitted evidence to her HR department under a pseudonym. Not to get her fired. Just to tip the balance. To let the people who once laughed at me start laughing at her. Week 3, I scheduled a meeting at the house lawyer present. She came home from work and found us sitting at the dining table. Her smile faltered. "What's going on?" she asked, eyes flicking between us. My lawyer slid the documents across the table. "We're here to discuss your next steps," I said calmly. "I filed for separation. Your access to all financial accounts has been revoked. I've already secured evidence of your misconduct." She blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" "Blake, I don't understand, eh?" "You don't have to understand," I said, voice still even. "Just read." She did. Her hands trembled. And that was the first time I saw it, real fear. Not the fear of getting caught. The fear of consequences. Of reality slamming into the fantasy she'd been living. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I'm very serious." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just the clean, cold click of justice finding its place. From that moment on, everything changed. Her phone, once glued to her hand, stayed face down on the table. She started sleeping in the guest room. The spa trips stopped. So did the dinners out, the random Amazon packages, the indulgent brunches with friends. Because her cards didn't work anymore. Because her name didn't carry the protection it used to. Because the people who once joked about how clueless I was now watched her walk through the office with pity in their eyes. The woman who thought she could cheat in peace now lived in panic. And I had never felt more clear-headed. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask her why. Because at some point, you stop needing the reason. You just let the silence speak for you. And it did. Loud and clear. To the outside world, she looked fine. That's what social media's for, right? Curation. Illusion. Ella doubled down on it. Her feed transformed into a highlight reel of independence, coffee shop selfies, yoga class check-ins, brunch photos with vague captions about new beginnings and personal growth. Hashtags like #resilience, #healing, #self-love. You'd think she was thriving. But I knew better. Because behind that filter of strength was chaos. Because I had already seen the crumbling behind the curtain, the unpaid bills, the canceled credit cards, the increasingly desperate calls to her bank. The posts didn't show the overdraft fees or the half-empty fridge or the fact that she had quietly sold 2 of her designer handbags to make rent on her new apartment. Not an apartment, really. A shoebox. She moved into a place across town, one of those cheap complexes built in the 80s that always smell like mildew no matter how much you clean. I found the address when legal paperwork required an update to her contact information. I didn't go there, had no interest in seeing the aftermath up close. But I looked it up online. Studio. First floor. No washer-dryer. Linoleum floors and a cracked balcony railing. It used to be a running joke, those sad apartments we'd pass on long drives. Bet that place has roaches with names, she'd laugh. And now? Now she lived there. The woman who once curated an entire Pinterest board for our dream kitchen now microwaved noodles in a dented kitchenette with flickering track lights. She told everyone it was a conscious decision. Minimalism, she called it. I needed to simplify. But I knew the truth. She had nowhere else to go. Friends? The real ones, the mutual ones, drifted quickly. It's funny how loyalty shifts when people realize who broke the vows. A couple of them reached out to me in private. Apologized for not seeing it sooner. Told me she'd changed. That they barely recognized her anymore. Even her parents, who had always treated me like a son, stopped calling. I heard through the grapevine they were disappointed not just in the affair, but in the aftermath. And how she handled it. Or didn't. Meanwhile, I thrived in the silence. The house felt cleaner. Lighter. Even when I was alone, it didn't feel empty. Just quiet. And honest. I started fixing things. Not just around the house in my life. I picked up old hobbies. Took long walks without needing to check in. Caught up with friends who'd politely vanished during the marital fog. Rebuilt connections that actually mattered. People noticed. At work, my coworkers said I looked lighter. Less tense, one of them said during a team lunch. And I was. Because the thing that had been dragging me under was gone. Or rather, I had set it down and walked away. Ella, meanwhile, continued performing. I knew because I still followed her silently. Just to observe. Just to understand how far she'd drifted from the woman I once knew. Her posts became more frequent. More curated. But something shifted in the tone. At first, she was radiant. Proud. Independent. Then came the subtweets. Funny how people only support you when you're doing what they want. Loyalty is a myth. Self-respect isn't. Sometimes starting over means losing everyone. I didn't comment. Didn't message. But I knew what those were. Echoes of regret. Not the public kind. Not the apology. Just the quiet, gnawing realization that freedom without foundation feels a lot like falling. And she was falling. She started posting throwbacks, old photos from vacations, dinner dates, sunsets with no context. Captions like, hard to believe this was just last year. It was like watching someone try to rewind a tape they'd already burned. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't gloat. That's not who I am. But I paid attention. Because somewhere deep down she wanted to be seen. Not as the woman who cheated, but as someone who had been misunderstood. Who was hurting. And maybe she was. But so was I. And the difference was I hadn't tried to fix my pain by breaking someone else. I heard from a mutual friend that Nathan had gone quiet. Apparently, HR had investigated. Nothing formal came of it, no policies broken, but he'd stepped back. No more mentorship meetings. No more long lunches or after-hours drinks. He didn't mention her anymore. Didn't like her posts. Didn't show up in her stories. Whatever fantasy they'd built collapsed the moment it became real. I figured that might happen. It's easy to chase an illusion when there's no cost. But once the price shows up, once the novelty wears off and the real world comes knocking, people reveal themselves. She lost more than me. She lost the narrative. And that, I think, hurt her more than she ever expected. Because Ella had always been in control. Of the story. Of the optics. Of the way people perceived her. But you can't spin your way out of an empty apartment and dwindling friendships. You can't hashtag your way through real loneliness. And slowly, that filtered version of her began to fade. Less frequent posts. Fewer smiles. More silence. Until one day, she disappeared from social media altogether. No explanation. No final post. Just gone. I didn't check for a while after that. I figured she needed space not from the world but from herself. From the version of her that couldn't admit she'd made the wrong bet. And I gave her that space. Because I didn't need to win. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already won the moment I chose peace over pride. The moment I decided to walk forward instead of chasing what had already crumbled. It's strange mourning someone who's still alive. Who still walks the same streets, breathes the same air. But grief isn't just for death. It's for the loss of potential. The death of the version of your life you thought was real. I grieved her. And then I let her go. Not out of hatred. But because there was nothing left to hold onto. 3 weeks passed before I saw her again. I wasn't expecting it. I was out back watering the garden. Something about tending to living things had become oddly therapeutic. The sound of gravel crunching made me turn, and there she was. Ella. No makeup. No smile. Just a gray hoodie, leggings, and eyes that had lost their shine. She looked smaller than I remembered. Like the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders and she didn't know how to carry it. Hey, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. I just turned off the hose and waited. I know I shouldn't be here, she said, staring at the ground. But I didn't know where else to go. That part hurt. Not because I wanted her back, but because I realized just how far she'd fallen from a woman who once held the world in her hands to someone who had burned every bridge behind her. She looked up then, and I saw it. Not defiance. Not excuses. Regret. I messed up, she said. I told myself I was finding myself, that I needed freedom. But all I found was silence. And bills. And loneliness. I crossed my arms. You made your choice, Ella? She nodded quickly. I know. I know. I thought I wanted out. But what I really wanted was to feel in control. I thought if I could just break away from everything from you, I'd feel powerful. But it didn't feel like power. It felt like falling. She looked at me then, tears just behind her eyes. I lost everything that mattered, Blake. Including myself. I didn't say much. I couldn't. I had no idea what this was supposed to be, an apology? A plea? She took a breath. I'm not asking to come back. Not right now. I needed to tell you that you were the only person who ever stood by me. Even when I didn't deserve it. There was a pause. Long and still. I'm sorry, she said again, softer this time. For everything. And then she left. No drama. No promises. Just silence. A few days later, I found a manila envelope on my doorstep. Inside were the unsigned divorce papers. And a note. I don't know if I deserve to be your wife again, but I know I don't want to be the person I've been. I understand now that independence without responsibility is just isolation. I'm willing to rebuild, not for show, not for social media, but for truth. If you can't accept that, I understand. But I had to say it. There were no pleas for forgiveness. No manipulations. Just honesty. For the first time in months, I believed her. But belief doesn't erase damage. It doesn't restore trust. That takes time. That takes action. So I gave her a path. Not a welcome mat. A path. I told her if she wanted anything beyond closure, it would have to be earned brick by brick. Consistency, honesty, humility. No romantic gestures. No grand apologies. Just real effort. She didn't push back. She didn't try to charm me. She simply nodded and said she understood. And I could tell for the first time that she really did. So we waited. Not together. Not apart. Just honest. Because maybe love isn't about who we were. It's about who we choose to become and whether we're willing to rebuild with bare hands instead of illusion.